The village of Velton had never been the kind of place to make headlines or stories. Tucked between the hills and shadowed by dense woods, it was a land where time moved slowly, where seasons passed with quiet routine. But one autumn morning, smoke rose over Velton, thick black smoke curling into the sky from the eastern hills. Elijah, a man known simply as the farmer, paused as he hitched his oxen. His sharp eyes narrowed on the plume. Smoke wasn't unusual during harvest season, but this was different. It rose too fast. It was too dark. It was coming from a place that had been abandoned for years. The old Lerner homestead. Most of the village avoided that place. Rumors clung to it like vines, that it was cursed, that it had once housed rebels during the war. That strange chanting could be heard from its ruins. But Elijah wasn't one for stories. He was a man of the land, a man who didn't scare easily. And still, something about that smoke made the hair on the back of his neck rise. He left the plow where it was and started walking toward the source, his boots crunching over dry leaves. With each step, the scent of burning wood thickened in the air, until the acrid sting of smoke clawed at his throat. When he reached the ruins, the scene was worse than he expected. The house, what was left of it, had collapsed in flames. Parts of the stone foundation still stood, but most of the upper floor had fallen. Amid the chaos, the unmistakable figure of a woman crawled from the edge of the fire. Her dress was torn, her skin blistered, her breath shallow. Elijah rushed to her, pulling off his coat to shield her from the heat as he dragged her back from the collapsing beams. She looked at him with wide, terrified eyes, her lips moving without sound. "You're safe now," he whispered, kneeling beside her, but she shook her head violently and gripped his hand with surprising strength for someone so close to death. Her voice came out in rasps. "She's still in there, in the ashes. Please. Elijah's brows furrowed. "Who, my daughter?" she breathed. "Hannah. I hid her in the fireplace. Under the ash, please." Then, her hand went limp. Elijah stared down at her still body, heart pounding. 1,000 thoughts crowded his mind, but one rose above the rest. There's a child in that fire. And she may still be alive. Without a second thought, he yanked his coat back on, wrapped a cloth around his mouth, and plunged into the smoke. The flames had begun to die in parts, but the heat was intense. He used his boots to kick away burning wood and beams, coughing violently as he made his way toward the massive stone fireplace at the far end. The hearth was scorched black, half filled with debris. He dropped to his knees, brushing away ash, with his gloved hands, working quickly, praying he wasn't already too late. Then he saw it, the faintest movement beneath a pile of soot-covered fabric. He pulled it free, revealing a small bundle, a girl, barely 4 years old, covered in gray. She didn't move at first. Panic clutched Elijah's chest, but then her chest rose, just slightly. Alive. He scooped her up, shielding her tiny frame in his arms as he stumbled back out of the ruins. The cool air hit him like a wall. He dropped to his knees, coughing, cradling the girl tightly. Villagers had begun to arrive by then, drawn by the smoke. Gasps filled the air when they saw the charred ruins, the dead woman, and Elijah, blackened with soot, holding a little girl who blinked up at him with silent terror. "She's alive," he said hoarsely. "She's alive." But something in her eyes made him pause, not fear, not confusion. Something deeper, like the girl knew who he was, or worse, what he really was. The child didn't speak. Not that first day, not the next. She clung to Elijah with wide, unblinking eyes, her small fingers digging into his coat, as if afraid he'd vanish if she let go. When the village healer tried to examine her for burns, she shrank away. When the others asked her name, she said nothing. Only Elijah could get her to move, to eat, to rest. They took to calling her Ash Girl. Elijah, who had never fathered a child, now found himself tending to one as if he had always known how. He made a place for her in his small farmhouse, a narrow bed beside the hearth, warm porridge each morning, a hand on her back when nightmares shook her from sleep. Her silence didn't trouble him. He had always been a man of few words himself. But it wasn't just the silence. It was the way she watched the world, to still too knowing. As though the fire had burned through more than flesh and wood, as though it had awakened something ancient inside her. The villagers were wary. Velton had always clung tightly to its superstitions. Children pulled away when they saw the girl in the fields. The baker crossed herself when Elijah walked by with her hand in his. And the priest, Father Denick, came calling one evening, candlelight, flickering in the hallway shadows. "She's cursed," the priest said bluntly. "You should take her to the orphanage in Sprin." It's safer there. Elijah met his gaze. Safer for whom? Father Danik frowned. There are stories, Elijah, about her mother, about that house. No one goes near the Lerner ruins for good reason. She hid her daughter in a fireplace to save her life, Elijah said coldly. That doesn't sound like a curse to me. But, even he couldn't deny that strange things had begun to happen since Ashgirl came into his life. The fields around his home, once slow to yield, now burst with thick, golden wheat. His cows produced more milk than they ever had, and his old hound, blind in one eye for years, began to chase squirrels again. And then there were the dreams. They began 2 nights after he found her, vivid, suffocating dreams of fire and smoke, of voices whispering his name, of a forest he had never seen but somehow recognized. Each time he awoke, heart pounding, she would be sitting up, staring at him, as though she'd seen the same dream. One night, he finally asked, "Do you dream of the fire?" She nodded slowly, and the forest, another nod. Then, for the first time, she spoke. "They're waiting." Elijah froze. "Who's waiting?" She didn't answer, just crawled back under the blanket and turned her face to the wall. From that moment, things only grew stranger. Animals began to avoid their farm. Birds circled overhead but never landed. Neighbors whispered that the wind carried voices near Elijah's land. That trees near the edges of his property bent in odd directions, away from the house. He tried to ignore it, to believe it was just village nonsense. But one evening, when he walked the fields with Ashgirl trailing behind, he saw it for himself. At the far corner of the wheat, where his land met the forest, the ground had cracked open. A deep fissure split the earth, wide, enough to fall into. From within, a cold mist rose. Ashgirl walked to the edge, peered down, and said softly, "That's where they come from." Elijah stepped forward, uneasy. "Who?" She turned to look up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "The ones who burn and never die." He stared at her, stunned. That night, Elijah pulled the old chest from under his bed, the one he hadn't opened in 10 years. Inside lay a soldier's coat, medals long forgotten, and a book bound in black leather, a relic from the war, filled with accounts of forbidden things he once fought against but swore never to speak of again. He stared at the child asleep, beside the hearth, ash still tangled in her hair. She wasn't just a girl, she was a warning, and Velton had no idea what was coming. Elijah hadn't touched the black book in a decade, not since he buried his past like a stone in the earth. The war had ended, but the memories had teeth. Not just of battle, but of things that crawled through fire, that whispered in lost languages, that turned men into vessels for something old and ravenous. He'd burned half the records his unit recovered during those dark days, but he'd kept one, the field book they called the Grimoire of Velton. It had been recovered from a hollow tree just miles from where the village now stood. Written in a language that only half existed, blending old pagan tongues with symbols from somewhere else entirely. Elijah wasn't a scholar, but he remembered the drawings. He turned the cracked pages with ash-stained fingers. There it was, a sketch of a stone hearth, a child inside, hands crossed over her chest, surrounded by flames that didn't consume. Below it, the fire blessed, the ember carriers. He felt his throat tighten. Ashgirl hadn't just survived the fire, she had been meant for it. That night, while the wind howled through the shutters and the girl slept by the dying hearth, Elijah sat awake, combing through every page, every warning. The ember carriers are marked not by death, but by survival. Fire does not take them, it awakens them. They do not burn, they become the flame. That explained the fields, the animals, the unnatural abundance, but not the voices, not the growing crack in his land. Another page, when one awakens, the gate stirs. When the gate stirs, the watchers return. He slammed the book shut. This wasn't just about the girl, it was about what had been sealed away beneath the soil generations ago. A gate buried, forgotten, hidden beneath the wheat fields and centuries of denial. A gate her mother must have known about. A gate now opening again. The next morning, Elijah went into the village. It was market day, and the townsfolk gathered like clockwork. But conversations hushed when he arrived with the girl by his side. People stepped away. A few made signs of warding. He made his way to Father Danik. The priest was setting up a table of preserved herbs and incense, not for sale, but for blessing. Elijah didn't bother with pleasantries. "I need access to the old church records." Danik blinked. "The archives." "Why?" "Because that girl's mother knew something, and it's not in any book you'll find on your pulpit." Danik hesitated. "Elijah, I warned you. That child, she's not cursed. Alaya said through gritted teeth. She's a signal, and if we don't figure out what she's tied to, the ground is going to open up under this entire village. Danik studied the farmer for a long moment, his eyes searching his face. You sound like a soldier again. I might need to be. They met that night beneath the old church. The archives smelled of mildew and dust, the stone walls sweating with damp. Candles flickered as they flipped through fragile pages. Births, deaths, excommunications. Then Alaya found it. Marna learner. Midwife accused of firecraft, cleared by priesthood under Father Urich's judgment, warned repeatedly for isolating herself and speaking to the hearth. Danik leaned over the page. Marna learner. That was the mother's grandmother? Alaya nodded. It runs in blood. They found another entry, older still, a fire in 1832 that killed 11 villagers. A girl survived, pulled from a burning barn without a scratch. The name, Learner. She was one of them, Danik murmured. Like this girl. No, Alaya said grimly. She is the last one. As they left the archives, Danik touched the old stone walls and murmured a prayer. Alaya didn't join him. He looked up at the stars above Velton, stars that seemed dimmer, flickering. The wind carried a new scent now, bitter and metallic, like blood on old iron. When he returned home, the girl was standing in the field, barefoot, eyes glowing faintly, her hands at her sides, palms open. Around her, the wheat had withered into black stalks. She turned to him. They're almost here, she said, and from the forest beyond the fields, something moved. They came at dusk, not with horns, not with thunder, but with silence. Alaya stood at the edge of his ruined field, the scorched wheat swaying like brittle bones. The girl stood beside him, ash falling from her hair like snow. She stared to the tree line, eyes vacant, unblinking. Then they appeared, figures tall and thin, cloaked in shadows, their forms shimmering like heat rising off stone. They moved with purpose, but not haste, as though the world had always been theirs, and they had only paused for a moment to rest. Their faces were hidden by veils of smoke, drifting around them like torn memories. Alaya felt it first, not fear, but recognition. From the war. From the stories told in the barracks after men came back from the dark fronts, changed and hollow. From the old black book, where drawings of them danced between inked warnings. The watchers, the keepers of the ember gate. The burned and the bound. They've seen me. The girl whispered. Alaya crouched beside her. What do they want? To finish what was started, she said. But I wasn't supposed to live. I changed the path. He gripped her shoulder. Then we take a new one. But the ground behind them cracked, and a sharp breath of heat pulsed from the fissure that had widened overnight. Alaya could see now that it wasn't just a crack, it was a mouth. A tunnel downward, rimmed with scorched stone and clawed earth. They're trying to open the gate, he muttered. The girl turned to him, eyes glowing faintly. No, I'm the gate. The words chilled him. You're what they need to cross over, he said. She nodded, but not the way they want. By morning, the whole village knew something was wrong. The wheat fields had blackened. Livestock were found dead in their stalls, eyes wide with terror. Smoke hung in the air, even though no fire burned. And worst of all, the forest beyond Velton had changed. Trees bent backward, roots exposed like bones. Birds didn't sing. The village elders called a meeting in the chapel. Alaya stood at the front, the girl behind him. Some shouted for her removal. Others pleaded for understanding. Father Danik stood with Alaya, but his face was pale with doubt. She's not evil, Alaya said to the gathered crowd. She's a survivor, a warning. Her mother gave her life to keep her hidden from the fire. And now the fire wants her back. Someone in the crowd shouted, then give her to it. She's a child, Danik snapped. She's not, someone else muttered. She's something else. Look at her eyes. The girl looked at them all, silent. Then she spoke, her voice, steady. They only take what is offered. The crowd hushed. What does that mean? Alaya asked her quietly. She looked up at him. They can't force the gate. I have to open it. That's the pact. Danik crossed himself. Then don't. I won't, she said, but they'll try to change me. That night, the watchers came closer. Alaya stood guard by the farmhouse, his old rifle across his lap. The girl slept beside the fire, which had burned low despite the constant feeding of logs. He kept the black book beside him, opened to the last page, a warning scrawled in what looked like dried blood. When the flame child chooses, the world unseals. Light or ash, nothing in between. He didn't sleep. Just before dawn, the shadows outside shifted. One of the watchers stood at the edge of the porch, just feet away. Elia raised the gun, but it didn't move. It spoke, not with a voice, but inside his head. You are not her blood, but you carry her burden. The fire chose her. You are in the way. Elia gritted his teeth. She's not yours. She was never yours either. Then, it faded like mist in a rising sun. Inside, the girl sat up. Her eyes burned bright. I heard them, she said. What did they say? She turned to him. That it has already begun. That the fire is spreading through dreams, through breath. That Velton will burn, unless I go with them. Elia shook his head. There has to be another way. Her small hand reached for his. There is, she said, but it will cost us both. The day broke red over Velden, not the soft warmth of a rising sun, but a harsh blood-orange glare that tinted everything in sickness. The sky was veiled in ash. The air was heavier now, harder to breathe. People woke coughing, their dreams dark and strange. Some swore they'd seen shapes moving across their ceilings while they slept. Elia stood outside the farmhouse, watching smoke curl from the cracked earth like breath from a dying god. The girl Hannah stood barefoot in the field where the wheat had once grown, where the gate now pulsed beneath the soil. I can hear them, she said softly. They speak in fire. Elia glanced at the horizon, where the woods had gone dark, not from night, but from absence. Trees had vanished in places. Swallowed. Gone. He wanted to say something, a reassurance, a plan, even a prayer, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. Not the war. Not the cursed pages of the Black Book. Not even the hollow ache of burying the friends he'd once fought beside. This was older than fear. Older than battle. And he understood now. This wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of will. They made the trek to the chapel just after midday. Father Danik was waiting, his robes scorched at the hems. The chapel had changed overnight. The stained glass flickered with an inner glow. The crucifix above the altar had cracked, not broken, just split, as if scorched from the inside. Elia placed the book on the altar. There's something missing. Something about the pact. About her role in all this. Danik turned the pages with trembling fingers. We're not scholars. This language, it wasn't meant for us. But it was meant for her, Elia said. She understands it. The girl stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the page. She placed her palm over the script, and the ink shimmered beneath her skin. Symbols twisted, shifted, became readable. She began to speak, not in the language of men, but in the language of the watchers, low and guttural, but carried on something deeper than sound. It echoed inside Elia's chest like a second heartbeat. Danik staggered backward, crossing himself. Then the girl stopped. It says the gate can close, she whispered, but not by force. Only by choice. Elia's jaw tightened. Yours, she nodded. It can be sealed. But I can't stay. Danik frowned. You mean you'd go with them? No, she said. I mean I'd go into the gate. Into the fire. Elia stepped back, stunned. You'd die. She looked at him, expression unreadable. No, I'd become what they can't control. He didn't understand, not fully. But the truth of it settled in his bones like winter frost. If she stepped into the gate willingly, she would become something beyond the watchers, something that couldn't be bent or burned. She would seal it from the inside. But she would no longer be a child. No longer be herself. Danik whispered, a sacrifice. No, Elia said, tears in his eyes. A transformation. That night, Elia took her back to the farmhouse one last time. He made her tea, sat with her by the fire. I used to think this house would die with me, he said. That I'd go quietly, and no one would know I'd been here. She looked up at him. But now they will. He smiled. A bitter, broken thing. You changed that. He handed her something wrapped in cloth, a small pendant, rusted with time, shaped like a flame. I wore this in the war. It brought me back more times than I deserved. She opened it, held it in her hand. It still will. He brushed ash from her hair. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes, she said. But I'm ready. Just before dawn, the village gathered. They watched in silence as Elia walked with the girl across the blackened fields, toward the gate. The watchers stood around it in a perfect circle, unmoving, waiting. The ground pulsed faintly with heat. Light flickered from below, as if from a sun buried deep within the earth. At the edge, Elia stopped. I could go with you, he said. She shook her head. You can't. You still belong to the world. Then, after a pause, but they'll remember you. She stepped forward. The watchers didn't move. didn't stop her, and then she was gone, swallowed by light. The gate roared, a deep seismic exhale. Then silence. The earth closed, the watchers vanished, and the sky cleared. It rained for 3 days after the gate closed, not heavy, not violent, a soft, endless drizzle that washed the ash from rooftops and soot from the trees. The cracked earth healed slowly. The blackened fields softened under the gentle fall, and by the 4th day, a thin veil of green began to peek through the scorched soil. Velton began to breathe. Again, people returned to their routines with the hesitance of those unsure whether the danger was truly gone. They whispered less, looked to the forest less. But none of them forgot the girl, or the man who had walked with her into the mouth of the unknown and come back without her. Elijah didn't speak much after that. He kept to his farmhouse. He still plowed, still mended his fences, still helped the neighbor's boy fix the wagon wheel when it broke. But something in him had changed, not hardened, not broken, but hollowed, as if a part of him had been sealed inside the earth with the child he couldn't save. The villagers watched him with a mixture of pity and reverence. They didn't know what he had given, what he had lost, but they knew the fire was gone, or so they thought. On the 7th day, Elijah found something at the hearth. It had been cold since the girl left the flames, refusing to take. The wood refusing to catch, but that morning, when he came down the stairs, the fire had returned. He hadn't lit it, yet there it was, burning bright and clean. Its warmth unmistakable, and in front of it, resting on the stones, was the pendant he had given her. It wasn't scorched. It wasn't melted. It gleamed as if newly forged, as if the fire had rebirthed it. Elijah knelt slowly, picked it up with trembling hands. On the inside of the locket, a new symbol had been carved, one not there before. A circle with a single flame in the center, surrounded by small marks. Elijah recognized them. Watcher runes, but inverted, bound, not free, contained. His breath caught in his throat. She had done it later that day. Father Danik visited. He found Elijah sitting on the porch, the pendant in his hand, the fire inside still burning. She closed it, Danik said softly. Elijah nodded, and left something behind. The priest sat beside him. People ask about her, what to call her, what to remember. She had a name, Alia said. Hannah Danik nodded. A name that should be spoken. They sat in silence for a while. The rain had finally stopped, and the sun peeked through gray clouds. Birds had returned to the trees. A fox darted through the brush at the edge of the field. Then Danik said, "You know, it's strange. The village elder's daughter, she says she's been dreaming of a girl in the forest. A girl made of flame. Says she speaks softly. Tells her stories." Elijah's eyes didn't move. "She's not gone," he said. "Not really." Danik hesitated. "Should we be worried?" Elijah looked toward the forest, where the wind stirred the leaves but no longer carried the scent of ash. "No," he said. "She made a choice. Not just to seal them away, but to watch. From the other side, to keep them from finding another gate." Danik frowned. "You think this has happened before?" "I know it has," Elijah replied, "but this time, we have someone guarding the door." That night, Elijah returned to the hearth. The pendant still lay beside him, its runes softly glowing in the firelight. He closed his eyes and listened. For a moment, he thought he heard something, a small voice, like wind through trees. Or maybe it was just the fire. Maybe it was memory. Or maybe she was still there, watching from behind the flame, waiting, watching, keeping. The gate closed because she had become the lock. Velton moved on. Years passed, children were born who never knew the fire. The gate beneath the soil became a story told only in whispers, only by those who dared remember. The field where the earth once cracked was planted over again, row by row, crop by crop, as though it had always been a place of peace. But something had shifted in the rhythm of life. Not in fear, in balance. The crops never failed after that summer. No sickness swept through the cattle. Storms passed over the village as if diverted by unseen hands. The people of Velton grew, married, built new homes. They prospered, quietly, carefully, and they never set foot too deep into the woods again. Elijah grew old with the weight of memory in his bones. His hands stayed strong, but his back bowed. His voice remained quiet, but people listened when he spoke, because though no one spoke it aloud, everyone knew he had faced the fire and lived. Children asked him about the girl, sometimes. The ash girl, the fireborn. He always said the same thing: she didn't burn. She became the flame. On the first frost of his 75th year, Elijah walked the edge of the field for the last time. He passed the place where the gate once opened, though no trace remained. The wheat swayed golden and tall, but when he pressed his palm to the soil, he still felt warmth beneath. She was still there. He sat down beside a stone he'd placed years before, small, unmarked, but known to him. The sun was setting, casting fire across the sky. He closed his eyes and let the silence take him. He didn't hear the footsteps, but he felt them soft. Bare. He opened his eyes. The girl stood before him. The same as that final day, ash in her hair, eyes too old for her, small face, but calm, peaceful. "You're not real," he said. She smiled faintly. "I'm not gone either." He didn't reach out. Didn't dare. "You kept them sealed?" he asked. She nodded. "As long as I live, and when you die." "I won't," she said softly, "not the way others do. I'm part of the gate now. A guardian of flame." He swallowed hard. Was it worth it? She didn't answer right away. The wind moved through the wheat, whispering secrets in a language he couldn't remember. Finally, she said, "You gave me a choice. That's more than most get. That's worth everything." He nodded, tears slipping silently down his weathered cheeks. "I miss you," he said. "I know." She turned then, walking into the wind, fading slowly until the wheat swayed through where she'd stood. And just like that, she was gone again. But the warmth remained. That winter, Elijah passed quietly in his sleep. They buried him beneath the tree on the hill, the one that overlooked the field. No headstone. Just a wooden marker with the image of a flame carved into it, placed by a priest who still remembered how close the world had come to burning. Years later, the story changed. The ash girl became a myth, a protector spirit, a fire that saved a village. Children left small offerings at the edge of the wheat, coins, ashes, tiny drawings. They said she watched from below, that her fire glowed under their feet, even on the coldest nights. They were right, because beneath the soil, in a space that was no longer quite part of the world, the girl who had once been Hannah still watched, still waited. The watchers had not returned. Not yet, but they would, and when they did, she would be there, eyes of ember, hands of memory, because the fire never forgets, and neither do the ones who carried it.